Thomas had never believed that a vacation could change everything that had become a part of his life. How could he leave everything behind when every day brought new sad memories? Time seemed to him like an invisible wall, behind which everything happened in a different time, a time that did not concern him and could not return. However, this morning was different. Everything changed in an instant. The park where he and Jessie were sitting looked alive, filled with morning light. A light breeze swayed the branches of the trees, and the sun broke through the leaves, creating shimmering reflections on the ground. Thomas felt this light penetrating him, but his thoughts, as always, were somewhere far away. Only she, Jessie, was able to pull him back into reality when she said words that could not leave him indifferent. "What if we go to the sea?" Her voice was light, but still full of emotion. She was looking at him with a smile, and Thomas felt something inside his heart flutter. He realized that she wasn't just saying it as a joke, but seriously offering the opportunity he had feared for so long, to escape, somewhere far away, where no one would be able to remind him of everything he had left behind. Miami. He imagined himself on a beach, where the white sand had nothing to do with his gray thoughts, where there would be no walls to limit his space. But could he go there without leaving behind all the pain that sat so deeply in his soul? Jessie's gaze was so sincere, her eyes a mirror of the emotions that Thomas felt, although he was afraid to express them. He looked at her, and in that moment he realized, he could not refuse. "I agree," his voice was quiet, but decisive. He had not expected it to be so easy. They sat there on the bench, and everything around them was so clear, so bright. Jessie tilted her head and smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. Thomas couldn't deny it, this moment was a new beginning for him. "We're going there together. This will be our new beginning," she said, and her words seemed to pierce him to the core. His heart beat faster, and Thomas felt a surge of hope that even he could forget, at least for a moment, all that was troubling him. It was exactly what he needed, even though he hadn't known it until that moment. But with Jessie by his side, he felt that anything could be possible. She reached up and gently took his hand. "Are you ready?" Her question was simple, but it sounded as if this moment would determine everything that would happen next. Thomas returned her gaze, feeling his muscles relax, his soul calm in this unexpected world that he would now discover with her. The wind blew again, and Thomas was surprised that a moment ago he had been thinking about his pain, and now a new opportunity was opening before him, a new page that he was ready to turn. Thomas wasn't sure what to do next. Vacation was something he hadn't allowed himself in a long time. Everything around him was like a fog, routine days, open wounds, uncertainty that intertwined with every thought. But Jessie, she was different. She could see more in him than he saw in himself. Her unwavering optimism was the only thing pulling him out of the darkness now. He couldn't let that go unnoticed. By agreeing to the trip, he had agreed not only to Miami, but to a change, to the opportunity to change his attitude towards himself. That very evening, when they had discussed the possibility of going to the sea, Jessie began to actively plan. She looked at her phone and immediately began searching for the best options, plane tickets, hotels that could accommodate them, exploring the city. There was a sense of excitement in her eyes, as if they had already been there, felt the warm ocean breeze on their faces. "Look," she showed him a screen showing several options for staying in Miami. Thomas looked at the list thoughtfully. His heart beat faster at the thought that this was real. This was no longer just a dream, but a reality unfolding before his eyes. He wasn't ready to fully reveal his feelings yet, but this moment was what he needed. She knew how to guide him through the process. Jessie said, "Maybe we'll go and see the city. There will be so many new experiences, so many emotions. We can meet new people, taste new foods." She looked as if she had seen the whole picture. Thomas just nodded, feeling light in his heart. It was a moment when everything he had lost seemed temporary. Maybe that was exactly what he needed, a break from everything, finding new emotions, and rebooting. And Jessie was the one who could make that possible. Thanks to her energy and optimism, even the preparation for the trip became an exciting process. Together they chose not only a place to relax, but also the next adventure that awaited them. Conversations about plane tickets reflected those moments when they dreamed of a distant beach, hot sun, and a carefree life without restrictions. "Where do you want to go on vacation?" Jessie asked, as they decided together where to go in Miami. They didn't think about problems, they didn't think about what was left behind. This was a time for new opportunities. "Actually, I would go to the beach," Thomas answered, looking at her with a hint of ease in his eyes. "Somewhere where it will be calm, where we can be together, where there will be no noise, just us and the sea." Jessie smiled and nodded. There was joy in her eyes, a sense that they were not just running away from something, but also striving to find something that would give them true happiness. "Then let's go," she said enthusiastically, and Thomas finally began to believe that this trip would be a new chapter in their lives. Every step of the journey brought new emotions. They laughed together, happily chose routes, shared thoughts about what awaited them in a new place. Thomas felt his heart gradually opening to new possibilities, to new experiences, and even to truly living in the moment. Every journey begins the moment you take to the skies. And for Thomas, that moment was more intense than he could have imagined. The plane approaching Miami seemed more than just transportation, it became a symbol of a new beginning. Every takeoff, every rev of the engines, raised his adrenaline levels, but Jessie sat next to him, and that brought him peace. She was looking out the window, her eyes sparkling with excitement, and it was what Thomas had been waiting for so long, the feeling that he could finally escape everything and start a new life, even if only for a few days. "Are you ready?" Jessie asked, turning to him with her typical optimism in her voice. Thomas looked at her radiant face, and felt how the question reflected more than just physical preparation for their arrival. It was a question about their feelings, about their willingness to change their lives and allow themselves to experience freedom. "I think I'm ready." His voice was a little excited, but that didn't stop him from feeling a surge of energy welling up inside. They landed at Miami International Airport, and as soon as the plane touched down, Thomas felt that this was not just any airport. This was a new chapter in their lives, and he could feel it. With every step he took through the airport, he believed more and more that this place would change something about him. Their rental car was ready to go. They got in the car, and Jessie couldn't help but say, "Can you imagine, Miami? A real city, and we're here. It's all starting now." Thomas looked at her, and even his heart felt how this place could truly be their new beginning. The streets of Miami looked huge, with serious, tall buildings that seemed unwelcoming, but over time he felt how these streets became part of their journey. The setting sun bathed the city in a soft, warm light that accentuated the contrasts between the cityscape and the natural beauty that surrounded it. Their hotel was located on the coast, and immediately after they arrived, Thomas felt the need to leave the car and enjoy a walk along the beach. He and Jessie walked in silence, listening to the whisper of the waves lapping on the sand. Their footsteps covered the distance softly, and Thomas thought how wonderful it was to feel like they were here and not think about everything that was left at home. He felt joy, even fear, at the new sensations, and at the same time these moments brought him a sense of peace. "You know, this is more than just a vacation," Thomas said, looking at the sunset. His voice was quiet, but there was more to it than just words. He spoke of it as something more than just being physically in a new place. It was a moment when they could leave everything behind and be together, and that meant a lot. "It's all about new possibilities," Jessie said, her words calm but hopeful. "This is our time." And in that moment, Thomas felt that even with all his doubts and fears, this journey would change him. They hadn't just come to Miami, they had set out on a new path that would bring more than just pleasant moments, it would bring inner victory, even if it meant letting go of old hurts and starting over. The sea breeze caressed his face, and the sand was warm beneath his feet. Because for Thomas, each step was like a small victory, he could feel the distance between him and his past shrinking. Jessie walked beside him, dancing slightly, her laughter carried by the wind, and it seemed to be the only sound that gave meaning to everything around them. They traveled along the coast, taking their time, completely immersed in the moment. Miami Beach was quiet and unusual, at least for them. Most people had already retired to their hotels or restaurants, but they remained, just two young hearts laughing and enjoying simple things. There was no goal or plan here, just the desire to be together. "It's so peaceful," Jessie said as they both sat on the sand, looking out at the endless sea, reflecting the evening sun. "I can't even remember the last time I was so peaceful. Just here." Thomas agreed, but his eyes were a little sad, though not so clearly. The wind brought cold waves crashing against the shore, but in his heart there was a warm bitterness. He felt a sense of hope growing in him, but at the same time, doubt. It was a part of him, and he knew that even if this was a new beginning, he would still have to come to terms with what he had left behind. "You know, I never thought the sea could have such power," Thomas said, staring at the horizon. "That it could make you forget everything else. All these days, all these thoughts. Everything left at home. They seem so unimportant now." Jessie looked at him, her face not surprised. She had always understood him better than he understood himself. Her gaze was gentle, warm. "Maybe this is our chance. Maybe this place, this sea, will help us find new feelings and see ourselves from a different perspective. Because we can always start over. Not just here, but anywhere. We can be anything." Thomas turned his gaze to Jessie. Her words struck him. They were simple, but in their simplicity was the truth. And although he still had his doubts, he wanted to believe her words. He knew that together with her they could build something new, even if the whole world around them remained the same. "Yes, maybe this is our chance," he answered quietly. "I don't know what to expect, but here, right now, anything seems possible." Jessie smiled and turned back to the sea. The sun was beginning to set, and everything around them was drowning in golden hues that embraced the land and the water. They sat on the sand, holding hands, as the evening sky changed and new life began to surround them. The sunset gradually blossomed into richer colors, and the city of Miami, which was new and unknown to them, now seemed like a part of their life journey. This was not just a place where they were resting, it was the moment when Thomas and Jessie understood that with every step, with every choice, their story was changing, and there would be no going back to who they were before. On the beach, under the light of the soft evening sun, they sat side by side, quietly talking about their dreams, hopes, and what they wanted to build together in the future. The sky was darkening, but their hearts remained light, free, like the waves that continuously licked the shore. "I think we have found here not only a place to rest," Jessie said, her voice calm, but with a clear emotional depth. "We have found our place for new beginnings. This moment will change everything." Thomas looked at her, and his eyes were grateful. He was no longer searching for answers in the past, he was here, now, with her. The feeling of relief and new hope did not fade. "We didn't just go on vacation," he replied, smiling slightly, but there was a deep seriousness in his words. "We went to find ourselves and to find each other." They sat there, holding hands again, and all that mattered in that moment was that they were together. Miami had become their new beginning, a place that would forever remain in their hearts as a symbol of change and new possibilities. With every step they took, with every conversation they had, their bond grew stronger, and their journey was not just geographical but emotional as well. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they knew one thing for sure: they were ready to walk this path together. And as evening fell on the city and the first stars lit up in the sky, they promised themselves that this was just the beginning. Miami was their first adventure together, and from that moment on, they vowed that their lives would be full of new beginnings that they would not back down from. The next morning, after enjoying a peaceful sunset, Jessie and Thomas set out to explore the city. Miami seemed vast and vibrant, the streets filled with the sound of cars, and everything around them was awash in color, from the bright storefronts to the loud neon signs. It seemed like every step here offered new opportunities, and they were ready to immerse themselves in a life that seemed so far removed from their hometown. They stopped for a few minutes at an art gallery, where they thoughtfully examined paintings that reflected Miami's cultural diversity. Jesse was amazed by the color palettes that shimmered on the canvases, trying to understand how these works could convey the essence of the city so deeply. "They're beautiful," she said, admiringly studying one of the paintings, which depicted a huge palm tree leaning towards the ocean. "It's like a combination of nature and the spirit of Miami. There's something magical about it." Thomas looked at her, his face filled with curiosity. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something new and vibrant. He walked over to another painting, depicting the city at night, its lights and shadows. "Yes, this is really a different place," he said, approving her opinion. "Everything here seems alive, dynamic. Miami has its own rhythm, its own soul." Walking through the streets, they came to a local cafe, where there were long tables outside, surrounded by plants. They sat down at one of them, ordered local dishes, savoring the aromas of spices that permeated the air. Thomas couldn't help but feel himself relaxing for the first time in a long time. In this city, on these streets, he felt like a new person, and there was nothing holding him back. Perhaps Miami was the place for him where he could finally see himself from a different perspective. "I never thought a city could have such a profound effect on your perception," Thomas said as they discussed their plans for the next few days. Jesse looked up and smiled softly. "Anything is possible here. We're just getting started, and I'm sure there are many more adventures ahead." Indeed, after a few hours on the streets of the city, it seemed to them that their adventure was just beginning. Miami had become more than just a city for them, it was also the key to a new world, a new life they were starting together. After a busy day of exploring Miami's art and culture, Thomas and Jesse ventured out into the city at night. Miami was changing in the dark. The streets were alive with neon signs, music was playing in cafes and clubs, and people were strolling along the waterfront, enjoying the warm night air. The city was bright and vibrant, a reflection of how they both felt right now, open to new possibilities, ready to dive into this carefree rhythm. "Look at this," Jesse said, smiling at the neon lights that lit the street. "This place is alive." Thomas smiled back, his heart beating faster, and he felt everything around him take on a magical quality. The streets, which during the day had seemed like just part of an ordinary city, now sparkled, as if an endless adventure was unfolding before them. "Yes, this place seems to have its own breath, its own energy," he replied, looking at the neon reflected in his eyes. They spent a few hours walking around the city, visiting several bars where cocktails were served on the open terraces. Miami seemed even more alive in the evening, and although Thomas could not yet completely forget what he had left behind at home, this evening was special to him. Every step along the streets of the city gave him a sense of freedom. Jesse stopped for a second, looked at him and said, "Have you noticed how all this is changing us? It's like you and I are opening new horizons here." Thomas stopped and looked at her, feeling her words resonate within him. "Maybe it is," he replied, feeling a sense of lightness fill his heart. "Anything seems possible." They walked through the streets, their hearts beating in unison with the city's rhythm. It wasn't just a night out, it was a journey into a new life, into a new phase. They didn't know what the future would bring, but Miami became the place where they could finally open up to each other and feel that anything was possible. The night in Miami was magical, and the atmosphere of the restaurant they had entered was so romantic that it seemed as if the whole world had stopped. The streetlights cast soft shadows, and the cozy outdoor restaurant was just the place where Thomas and Jesse could be alone, enjoying each other without the hustle and bustle of the outside world. Thomas sat across from Jessie, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes, giving her even more charm. She smiled, and it was something Thomas couldn't explain in words. There was such warmth and joy in her gaze that it was simply impossible to ignore. "I still can't believe we're here," Jessie said, her voice gentle but with deep meaning. I feel like this is all just a dream. Thomas looked at her, his heart beating faster. All his thoughts remained outside this place. He could just feel her words echoing inside him. This is more than just a dream, he replied quietly, with deep meaning. This is a new beginning. This is our reality. There was more than just a physical presence between them. They sat together, sharing every second, every laugh, every look. Their gazes had a depth that was hard to put into words. They talked about the future, about everything that awaited them after this journey. They were no longer the people who had come to Miami, they were now part of something bigger, something they had created together. You know, this was exactly what we both needed, Jessie said, her head tilted slightly. We just had to find this moment, this time for us. Thomas smiled and put his hand on hers. Their fingers intertwined, and it was the moment when their connection became even stronger, even deeper. All the doubts, all the fears, all the things that had troubled them before, vanished in that moment. And we found him, he replied. And I know this is just the beginning. The days spent in Miami became unforgettable moments that they would both remember for the rest of their lives. Every morning brought new experiences, every sunset was filled with silence and peace. They felt that their bond had become even stronger than ever before. And so, at the end of this wonderful vacation, they went for one last walk on the beach, as night began to envelop the city and the stars woke up in the sky. Thomas and Jessie walked side by side, without words, enjoying being together, and each step on the sand seemed like the last, but at the same time the first. The winds blew from the ocean, whispering gently in their ears and dispelling the last doubts. The moon rose in the sky, and its light illuminated their faces, emphasizing this moment of peace and harmony. You know, I don't want to leave this place, Jessie said, her voice soft but full of deep emotion. She looked out at the sunset, where the last rays of light gently embraced the horizon. Me too, Thomas replied, but his voice was calm and clear as ever. But I understand that this is just a step towards something bigger. You and I have experienced things here that will help us in the future. They sat on the sand and looked out at the sea, feeling how their time together had changed them. They knew this wasn't just a trip, it was an encounter with a new beginning they were building together. We'll come back here, Jessie said, her words ringing like a promise. Thomas smiled and looked at her, feeling all his doubts disappear. He knew this wouldn't be the last time they would be here, on this beach, together again. Yes, we'll be back, he replied, and those words meant more than either of them could have imagined. They were heading home, but Miami remained in their hearts, a symbol of their new life, new opportunities, and a future together. They walked to the hotel, each step filled with new hope. This vacation was not only a physical reset, but also an emotional discovery that changed their view of the world. And although Miami was left behind, the memories they had created together remained with them forever.